10 Hollywood graves hidden from fans. John Wayne died on June 11, 1979, and for nearly 20 years after his death, almost nobody knew where he was buried. His family made that choice deliberately, keeping the location of his grave completely secret to protect their privacy and prevent his resting place from becoming a public attraction. He was buried at Pacific View Memorial Park in Newport Beach, California, on a quiet hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The grave had no marker, no headstone, and no plaque of any kind. For 19 years, the exact location was known only to his family and a small number of people close to them. It was not until 1998 that a small bronze plaque was finally placed at the site. After the family decided enough time had passed, even then, the inscription was understated, reading simply in both English and Spanish, reflecting Wayne's deep connection to the American West and its borderland culture. Wayne had spent decades as one of the most recognizable faces in American cinema, starring in classics like Stagecoach, True Grit, and The Searchers. He became the defining symbol of the Hollywood Western, a genre he helped build almost single-handedly over a career spanning more than 4 decades. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor for True Grit in 1970, one of the few times his peers formally acknowledged what audiences had always known. John Wayne was born on May 26, 1907, in Winterset, Iowa. He died at the age of 72. John Belushi died on March 5, 1982, and was buried at Abel's Hill Cemetery on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. His grave was marked, his name was on the stone, and fans knew exactly where to find him. That was the problem. Within months of his burial, the grave had become a gathering point for fans who left behind beer bottles, drug paraphernalia, and piles of litter that regularly disturbed the surrounding plots. The behavior became so disruptive and disrespectful to the cemetery and its other residents that his wife, Judy Jacklin, made a quiet decision. She had his remains secretly moved to a different, undisclosed location within the same cemetery, some distance away from his original headstone. The headstone remains where it was placed. His actual body is somewhere else in the same grounds, and only a handful of people know exactly where. Fans who visit the marked grave and believe they are standing at his resting place are not. Belushi had built one of the most explosive comedy careers of his generation through Saturday Night, live in films like Animal House and The Blues Brothers, becoming one of the most beloved performers of the late 1970s. His death from a drug overdose at just 33 years old shocked the entertainment world and ended a career that had barely started. John Belushi was born on January 24, 1949 in Chicago, Illinois. He died at the age of 33. Walt Disney died on December 15, 1966, and was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. The location of his grave within the cemetery is one of the most deliberately protected secrets in Hollywood history. The cemetery does not disclose it. Staff actively redirect visitors who ask, and the area where he rests is entirely off-limits to the public. Disney was cremated, and his ashes were interred in a small, private family garden within Forest Lawn that cannot be accessed by general visitors. The cemetery has confirmed his burial there, but has never publicly identified the exact location or allowed fans to approach it. Tours of the cemetery, even exclusive ones, do not include his resting place. The secrecy is believed to reflect the wishes of the Disney family, who have consistently protected the privacy of their patriarch's burial from the millions of fans who grew up with his work. Disney had built an entertainment empire that changed the entire cultural landscape of the 20th century, creating Mickey Mouse, founding Disneyland, and producing films like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Fantasia, and Bambi. He won more Academy Awards than any other individual in history, with 22 competitive Oscars and 4 honorary ones. Walt Disney was born on December 5, 1901, in Chicago, Illinois. He died at the age of 65. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor died on March 23, 2011. And her burial at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, was deliberately arranged to be as inaccessible to the public as possible. Her grave is unmarked, and the cemetery does not disclose its location to visitors or fans who ask. Taylor was famously 15 minutes late to her own funeral, honoring a request she had made years earlier that the service should begin before her casket arrived. It was a final act of control over her own story, and that control extended to her resting place. She did not want a grave that would become a tourist destination, and her family and the cemetery have honored that wish completely. Unlike some of the more famous graves at Forest Lawn, there is no visible marker, no nameplate, and no way for a visitor to identify her plot from the ones surrounding it. Taylor had been one of the most famous women in the world for more than half a century, winning 2 Academy Awards for Best Actress for Butterfield 8 and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and starring in films like Cleopatra and Cat. On the Hot Tin Roof, she was married 8 times and remained a constant presence in the public eye even decades after her peak years on screen. Elizabeth Taylor was born on February 27, 1932 in London, England. She died at the age of 79. Greta Garbo died on April 15, 1990, and was buried at Skogskyrkogården Cemetery in Stockholm, Sweden, as far from Hollywood as it was possible to place her. She had purchased the burial plot there decades before her death, quietly making arrangements to ensure that she would spend eternity in her home country, away from the industry and the public that had defined her working life. The grave is modest, marked only with her name, reflecting a woman who had spent the final 50 years of her life deliberately avoiding attention. After retiring from acting in 1941 at just 36 years old, Garbo had lived in self-imposed seclusion in New York City, refusing interviews, avoiding cameras, and declining almost every public appearance. The choice of a Swedish cemetery over a Hollywood one was entirely consistent with who she had become. The location in Sweden ensures that most of her American fans will never visit, and those who do must travel to a quiet, beautifully maintained woodland cemetery designed by UNESCO-recognized architects. A far cry from the glamour of Forest Lawn, Garbo had been one of the most magnetic screen presences of the 1920s and 1930s, starring in films like Anna Karenina, Camille, and Ninochka. She received 3 Academy Award nominations and an honorary Oscar for her contribution to cinema. Greta Garbo was born on September 18, 1905, in Stockholm, Sweden. She died at the age of 84. Steve McQueen died on November 7, 1980, and there is no grave to visit, no marker to find, and no physical location where fans can pay their respects. By his own request, he was cremated, and his ashes were scattered over the Pacific Ocean. He chose to leave no permanent resting place behind. The decision was consistent with the intensely private nature McQueen had always maintained despite his enormous fame. He had spent much of his career resisting the Hollywood machine, turning down roles that didn't interest him, walking away from projects mid-negotiation, and living life on terms he set himself. Leaving no grave was simply one final expression of that independence. For fans who want to feel close to him, there is nothing to visit. No cemetery, no memorial garden, no plaque. The ocean holds what remains of him, and the ocean does not give directions. McQueen had been one of the most compelling screen presences of the 1960s and 1970s, earning the nickname the King of Cool through films like Bullet, The Great Escape, and Papillon. He received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor for The Sand Pebbles, and remained one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood for over a decade. Steve McQueen was born on March 24, 1930, in Beech Grove, Indiana. He died at the age of 50. Freddie Mercury died on November 24, 1991. And the location of his actual burial is one of the most genuinely kept secrets in the entire history of popular entertainment. His closest friend, Mary Austin, was the only person entrusted with his ashes after his death, and she has stated publicly that she buried them in a location she will never reveal, honoring a specific request Mercury made before he died. Mercury was terrified that his grave would be vandalized or disturbed, and he asked Austin to keep its location secret permanently. She has kept that promise for more than 3 decades, refusing to confirm where his remains are, even as curiosity has never faded. A memorial plaque exists at Kensal Green Cemetery in London, but it marks only a tribute, not the actual burial site. Where Mercury truly rests remains unknown to the public, to journalists, and to most of the people who loved his music. Mercury had been the lead singer of Queen, one of the most successful rock bands in history, writing and performing songs like Bohemian Rhapsody, We Are the Champions, and Somebody to Love. His live performances, particularly at Live Aid in 1985, are still widely considered among the greatest in rock history. Freddie Mercury was born on September 5, 1946 in Zanzibar. He died at the age of 45. Frank Zappa died on December 4, 1993, and was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California. His grave is unmarked, and its exact location within the cemetery has never been publicly confirmed. Fans who visit Westwood, one of the most celebrity-dense cemeteries in Los Angeles, have no way of identifying which plot holds him. The reasons for the lack of a marker have never been fully explained by his family. Unlike some cases where the secrecy was deliberate from the start, Zappa's unmarked status appears to have developed without a clear public explanation, leaving fans with a confirmed cemetery but no identifiable grave within it. Westwood Village Memorial Park does not provide maps of celebrity grave locations, and staff do not assist visitors in finding specific plots. For Zappa, this policy means his resting place remains effectively hidden in plain sight, somewhere inside a small, heavily populated cemetery that thousands of people visit each year. Zappa had been one of the most unconventional and prolific musicians in American history, releasing over 60 albums across multiple genres and building a reputation as a fearless creative force who defied every commercial expectation placed on him. Frank Zappa was born on December 21, 1940, in Baltimore, Maryland. He died at the age of 52. George C. Scott died on September 22, 1999, and was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, California. Like several of his fellow residents at the same cemetery, his grave is completely unmarked, with no headstone, no plaque, and no nameplate identifying the plot. The location within the cemetery has been kept private at the family's request. Scott had always been a deeply private and intensely independent figure throughout his career, famously refusing to accept his Academy Award for Best Actor for Patton in 1970, calling the awards process demeaning and returning the Oscar. That same resistance to public performance and expectation appears to have extended to his burial, leaving fans with no physical marker to visit. Westwood Village Memorial Park, the small suburban cemetery that holds some of the most famous names in Hollywood history, does not distribute maps or assist visitors in finding unmarked graves, making Scott's resting place effectively inaccessible despite being located in one of the most visited celebrity cemeteries in Los Angeles. Scott had built one of the most respected acting careers of his generation, earning 4 Academy Award nominations and delivering iconic performances in films like Patton, Dr. Strangelove, and The Hustler. George C. Scott was born on October 18, 1927, in Wise, Virginia. He died at the age of 71 in Hudson Rock. Hudson died on October 2, 1985, and there is no grave for fans to visit. By his own arrangement, he was cremated and his ashes were scattered at sea, leaving no physical resting place, no marker, and no cemetery where anyone can go to pay respects. The scattering was carried out privately, with the exact location known only to those present. Hudson had spent the final months of his life at the center of one of the most significant public health stories of the decade, becoming one of the first major Hollywood figures to publicly acknowledge an AIDS diagnosis. Even though his team had initially told the press he was suffering from liver cancer, the truth only came out under pressure. Months after he had already known, that combination of public revelation and private burial created a strange final chapter for a man who had built his entire career on a carefully managed image. Fans who want to honor him have no physical location to visit, no headstone to photograph, and no grave to leave flowers at. Hudson had been one of Hollywood's most celebrated leading men throughout the 1950s and 1960s, starring in films like Giant, Pillow Talk, and Magnificent Obsession, and receiving an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. Rock Hudson was born on November 17, 1925, in Winnetka, Illinois. He died at the age of 59.